but shocking revelations that have emerged over the past weeks and months, exposing a web of corruption that has plagued our nation. It's a story that unfolds from the 2020 U.S. election through the funding of the origins of COVID-19, the pandemic, right up to the overt corruption within the Biden crime syndicate. This, my friends, is perhaps the darkest period of politics and political scandals and institutional decay in American history. Let me say that again so you're crystal clear. This may be the darkest period of political scandals in the history of the United States of America. First, the 2020 election, and the more we uncover on that, the more undeniable it becomes that Joe Biden owes his so-called victory to nothing but a blatant bunch of lies fueled by political corruption. Consider these facts. First, the IRS probe into the Biden family's money laundering payments from hostile nations should have been front and center and ended his candidacy. But instead, a stand-down order was given, protecting the Bidens from the consequences of his actions. Second, the FBI, the IRS sought to search Biden's house in September of 2020, but once again, a stand-down order was issued. Stand down! We must shield the Bidens from scrutiny. Third, the FBI authenticated Hunter Biden's laptop a year before the New York Post broke the story. The evidence was there, but conveniently ignored. Operation implying Russian disinformation. Remember that? They used the 2016 Russia collusion probe as a pretext to meddle in the 2020 election. But the FBI didn't stop there. They engaged in an influence operation with major newspapers, reporters, convincing all of them to downplay damaging reports about the Bidens, even when they knew the information was true. They even spied on Giuliani when he shared the laptop's contents with the New York Post. Now, I know this is a lot moving, and you say to yourself, well, how come there's not some reporters who stood up and stepped up? And that's a disgusting angle within this story. But let's not forget that when the FBI informed Twitter and Facebook about the alleged Russia disinformation campaign, they had already concluded that Russia wasn't trying to manipulate the election. Yet they spread those false lies. They demanded user data from Twitter. Musk has talked about this, ultimately leading to their shutdown for violating privacy rights. What's astonishing is that the FBI had established a presence within Twitter, inside former agents, communicating through their own dedicated Slack channel. Some of these agents, including Jim Baker and Don Burton, played pivotal roles in the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation. Are you understanding what's going on now? FBI infiltrated Twitter and other media news outlets and corrupted them. The FBI. Meanwhile, while all this was going on, the CIA concluded with the Biden campaign to spread disinformation, claiming that the laptop itself was Russia disinformation, not what was in it. No. The laptop. The actual story of a laptop was disinformation, which we all know now to be completely false. Mainstream media used this as an excuse to avoid reporting on its contents and instead attack those who dared to expose the truth. Do you remember all of us on the right screaming, just tell the story? How many times did I get in front of this microphone and say, just please tell the story. Share with everybody that there is a laptop, that it's actually real. Yet whenever you talked about that, in particular with other members of the media, particular left-leaning members of the media, somehow you're a crackpot. The orchestration of the alphabet mafia within the government on some of these false half-truths, again, goes back to my original statement. This is the biggest, absolutely the most widespread criminal act in maybe the country's history. This is why there's only really one real answer. The rot inside of these organizations is so deep and so widespread that it affects everybody, or almost everybody. You do have a few whistleblowers. I mean, but to justify shutting it down by their own agents, the corruption inside the Biden crime syndicate is so vast. When the story finally broke just weeks before the election, remember, Twitter and Facebook engaged in an unprecedented and undemocratic mass censorship, a campaign. It's worth noting that it was Jim Baker who convinced Twitter to censor the story, despite the FBI knowing for a year that the information was true. And if that's not enough, after the Biden so-called victory, FBI agents working with Twitter to celebrate their success added insult to injury. The FBI paid Twitter. They paid them $3.5 million for their involvement in these influential operations. Sounds like the mob to me, doesn't it? A little shakedown here, a little power play there, a little payoff here. And we all win in the end. And while this was all happening, Trump faced impeachment for asking Ukraine to investigate Biden's alleged corruption in Ukraine. There's no love lost between me and Trump, but the phone call, which was a perfectly good phone call, was actually a perfectly good phone call. We didn't know that the FBI, the IRS, already knew about the Biden's money laundering activities involving over $10 million from Burisma. All of this money going to an absolute drug addict criminal through him to his dad. They used fake companies, dozens of bank accounts, all while the vice president used U.S. aid and leverage to have the Ukraine prosecutor investigated and eventually fired. The FBI established a beachhead inside Twitter. So the next time you hear the Democrats decrying Republican efforts to protect the integrity of our democracy with things like voter ID and ending ballot harvesting, remember the real threat to American democracy comes from the deep state. It does exist. The deep state is real. Their actions sound suspiciously like a coordinated effort to undermine democracy, to install a family or a group of tyrants to rule as they wish. And you can make an argument it started with Obama. And this is just completing the plan. Joe Biden as the president of the United States, the puppet president, the people that are actually pulling the strings, who we really haven't uncovered that yet. We make assumptions. But those folks, those people are diabolical. And they are against everything that democracy and freedom stands for. They are truly involved in institutional decay. And yeah, when it comes to the corruption at the federal level, this is the darkest hour in the history of this country.